Hello everyone, and welcome to AWS Nordics Office Hours with me, Gunnar Grosch, developer advocate here at AWS. And this is my weekly show where I bring on AWS experts to talk about AWS related topics, of course. And this is an interactive show where we want you, the viewers, to be able to ask questions, comments, and let us know what you think about this topic. And of course, me and my guests will do our best to answer all of the questions you might have. And as I mentioned, I bring on experts, and this week is no different. I'm super happy this week to be joined by Ania. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Well, every week we do the quick round of introductions, and well, Ania, tell us who
S-
you are.
Yep, my name is Ania Develter. I'm a specialist solutions architect here at AWS in the cloud operations team. I've been at AWS just a few weeks short of 4 years. And I'm also a cat lady, which is something that you're going to realize as we continue talking today about observability.
All right. Yeah, we'll see more on that later on. So, welcome again, Anya. And good morning in the chat. Welcome to the show. And hopefully, by the end of this hour, we've all learned a lot more, not only about cats, but also about observability, as you said, Anya. And the topic of this week is developing an observability strategy. So, Anya, what are the challenges you see when customers come to you to talk about observability?
So yeah, a lot of the time customers come to me and they've been asked by someone to develop an observability strategy. It's a hot topic, but they don't always know where to start. So, they've been monitoring their whole life. They don't always understand why they even need observability strategy.
Mhm.
And more importantly, they sometimes don't know what to observe, or sometimes the idea of what to observe is not quite aligned to what a good observability plan will give them. So that's where I come in and talk to them about working backwards, and we'll cover more of that in the show.
Mm. Yeah, and you mentioned monitoring now, and we're talking about observability. Can you just briefly mention what's monitoring compared to observability?
So with monitoring, you will know if something's broken or isn't broken. Whereas with observability, so in the a kind of definition of observability is that you can infer the state of your system by the outputs or the external systems that it's outputting. So with observability, it's having the right tools in place and being able to answer questions that you didn't even know you had. So, for example, if you're in the middle of an incident, it's finding out what the root cause is quicker. For example, by having the right plan in place, it's responding quicker as well.
All right, and um, with monitoring, can we say that that is more reactive then compared to observability?
It is because, as I said, with monitoring, it just tells you know something's broken.
Mm.
It doesn't really tell you why properly, and it doesn't help you kind of reduce that mean time to resolve incidents. It doesn't tell you anything about how your application's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing for your customers. So, whatever service that you are delivering, be that an e-commerce website, a pet adoption website, or anything else, you're providing a service to someone, to customers. So you really need to know the impact. You need to know, is this application actually delivering what it's supposed to? Is my business thriving as a result? Are my
Mm.
customers getting the service that they need? And that's what observability is about. It's about knowing these questions, because typically, CPU might be hot on an instance, but it could be absolutely fine. Disk space could be fine, but your application might not be delivering the value or the what it needs to the customers. So this is why observability is important, because you actually need to know that you're delivering a system, not just how hot your CPU is running.
Right. All right. So then, if we think about what then is important for us to observe in an application, you gave some examples, but maybe we can talk a bit more about that. What do customers need to observe within their applications?
Okay, so I think it would be a good idea right now to put this into just a little bit of context, just to kind of make it, more relatable.
Hmm.
So, I already said I like cats and dogs. I have 6 actually. But let's just say I'm a customer and I want to adopt another cat because I clearly don't have enough. I'm gonna, if it's okay, I'm gonna just screen share and I'm gonna show you just like a really simple web application. This comes from our one observability workshop. And it basically is, it's a really simple little site here that allows you to adopt cats and dogs. There's some dogs here and some cats. So let's just say I want to adopt another dog. Why not?
Mm.
So I'm going to go into here and select type puppy and search. And I'm going to search which dogs are up for adoption. And I'm going to just adopt this little cute one. And there you go. I have now adopted another animal. My husband's going to be thrilled.
That's
But
easy enough.
it is, isn't it? But if you actually think about in terms of customers that visit a website like this,
Mm.
what do they care about? Do they care if my read replica, is a little bit behind, the main database? No, they don't. They actually
Not
don't
really.
care about
Mm.
that at all. But what they do care about, I'm just going to put this into presentation mode, sorry. What they do care about, it's things like the location of that animal, right?
Mm.
Because if you want to adopt a dog, you probably don't want to drive 5,000 miles. You want to have a choice. If you live in a big city, you're probably not looking for a wolf. You care about the donation price because if it's like too much, then you can't afford it, then you can't adopt from that charity. You care about things like security. If you're going to make a donation using your credit card, you want that information to be safe. Um, you want the page to load quickly because you're looking at pictures of animals. You don't want to get frustrated again. You don't want to go somewhere else. And again, like you saw me before, you want to adopt a dog, so you want to be able to search for what you need to search.
Yeah.
So actually, if you take that back to what should you observe, what you should observe is you should observe what's important to your organization and what's important to your customers, because that's the right starting point of what to observe, because then you know if your application's doing what it needs to do for your customers. So I
Yeah.
think this is different for a pet adoption site than if you had an online hotel. But that success criteria is the kind of the that's something that you need to consider when you're developing observability strategy. You need to actually write down what
Mm.
matters.
So yeah, looking at this, it's less about CPU metrics perhaps, and those kind of things that we normally, often at least, talk about when we talk about what to monitor in an application.
Yeah. But how that obviously, this is what your customers need.
Mm.
This is what typically you would work with your internal stakeholders. You'd understand what's important to the business as well, because a product manager will have more information than you. But then you move this along as you're designing your observability strategy to knowing what good looks like and knowing how to measure this. So this is typically some form of success criteria. So business key performance indicators
Yeah.
or service level agreements or service level objectives. But this is first you decide what your customers need, what your business needs, and then you find out what those success criteria are. And once you've written them down, this is when you can start putting together the strategy of how you're going to measure against them. And that's what you actually, that's the basis of what you observe. Because once you know what they are, you know when they're not right and
Mm.
you know when to take action. So by deriving these customer requirements, business requirements, and the success metrics, that's your basis of what you will be observing in your organization. I hope that
Right.
makes sense.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, and I know you have an example. You showed the example website. Now you also have an example of how to actually look at that through the dashboard.
I do. I do. So if I go back to my demo, I'm going to go over to the CloudWatch console now.
Mm.
And I'm here in CloudWatch console under dashboards, and I've opened a dashboard that I've named What Matters dashboard. So I've got a few widgets on there. I'm actually going to start with the middle here. So as you can see here, and obviously this is just an example dashboard. It would look slightly different for everybody, but I'm monitoring things like page load. I've got an imaginary SLA there, but I'm checking how quickly this page is loading. So if I connect this back to those requirements, customers who visit my site want the page to load quickly because they'll get frustrated and they'll go somewhere else. I'm looking at things like largest contentful paint. So this is a metric that is coming from real user monitoring and CloudWatch. So real user monitoring lets you take a look at the client side data from real user sessions, and it gives you information such as largest contentful paint. So what that metric tells you is the time that it takes to load the largest image on that site. So again, we're looking at photographs and we're looking at at dogs. So we want that to load quickly. Now, actually, this is an amber at the moment, so this might indicate that there's something not quite right. So again, there might be something with my application that means that the page is loading slowly. So perhaps I should check it out.
And the thresholds here, those are thresholds that you have selected for that website?
Yeah, the are thresholds are selected. And actually, that's maybe a good time to mention some of the recent improvements that it were announced. I think it was in the last 3-4 weeks. So if you take a look here, I've got some numerical thresholds set, and actually these colors change. So some of these are red in line with the threshold, some are green, some are amber. But that's one of the improvements that came recently. So if I actually click edit here, and if I go to options, I'm just going to change that. So, but what I can do is I can actually add these thresholds down here. And I can define that if a value is below a certain value, then we're okay. If it's between one value and the other, then perhaps we should take action. And I can change the colors here. So that's one of the things that was added. So I think like visually, if you're looking at something being in line or not in line with your success criteria, that's quite handy. I'm just going to cancel that so I don't mess up my website. But that's one of the things that I find quite useful. But actually, one thing that you might not have spotted that I wanted to draw your attention to is my dashboard at the moment. The time picker is on 3 hours. If I change that, say, to 1 day, some of these values are going to change to what data I've collected 1 day. But some of those are staying static, like availability last hour. That's another feature that was announced recently. So if your SLA is over a certain time period and you want to display that on your dashboard, you have the ability to kind of lock in that time range now. So if I head back over to options, actually it's not there, bear with me. I'm going to show you on a better one. I'm going to talk about these metrics later, but I am just going to show you this here. There's this option here to persist time range. So if you want that widget to stay static in line with your SLA, be that 1 day, 1 week, whatever, you can tick this box now that says persist time range. And then even if you change your time picker, it will always display the last day, last hour, how you've looked at. So that's one of the recent announcements. There's more things. Check it out. I'll not bore you with all of them, but there's quite a few there.
Well, that's a great improvement, and this is something that I've heard customers ask for as well. So I guess it's a great example of us delivering on that customer obsession in terms of CloudWatch in this case.
And it's very useful. Yep.
Yeah. No, there was a question or a comment in the chat. I just wanted to bring that up from Joffrey. That he agrees that the customer requirements are key when creating this observability strategy. But he wants to add that you should bring in this case, the architecture team. I suppose that could be other technical engineering teams and so on as well, to make sure that you're not missing anything. And I suppose that's the case always.
Absolutely. So it's twofold. So first of all, absolutely, you need to involve everyone because everybody has a different standpoint, and that's not just the IT and cloud architecture teams. As I said, that could be the non-technical stakeholders because they know better. We'll move on to the second part of this dashboard in a second, but to put it into perspective, but they might know better about the things that you should observe.
Yeah.
But also, you need a dashboarding strategy. So the dashboarding strategy is important, all of this as well. So there are kind of 4 things that I say when you're designing dashboards that you need to think about. The first ones is stakeholder dashboards. So stakeholders will come to you, and typically it's going to be during a time where it's most inconvenient,
Yep.
and they're going to ask you information. Because, these days, all this telemetry data comes in really useful for businesses. And I'll show you an example of that in a second. But if you design stakeholder dashboards, that's one step of kind of providing the right data to the right people. Then you're going to need your high-level dashboard. So this is very much a high-level dashboard. This tells me whether my application is serving its purpose, whether it's bringing to the business what it needs to bring, whether customers are having a good experience. And that should signal issues, hopefully even before they affect your customers.
Yeah.
But you also need those low-level dashboards as well. And the low-level dashboards are those ones that will have CPU, RAM, disk space, because these things going wrong still affect your application. I'm just saying don't start with those. So absolutely get everybody involved, but also know where these technical metrics need to appear, which dashboards and how they collect together and what the, at which point they detect issues. Because, I've had many incidents where CPU was fine, disk space was fine, the site was down.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. They're important, but you need to categorize them and know where they belong.
That's a great point. So
actually, since I just mentioned that before, stakeholder dashboards. So down here, this is a little widget I have, and it talks about where my traffic is coming. It's basically telling me the top 50 locations where my traffic is coming. So why would I care about this? So in terms of how that data can be useful for your business, if you're an animal charity that wants to get as many animals adopted as possible and as much money coming in to feed the animals that you need, if your traffic is coming in from, most traffic is coming in, say, from Frankfurt, and you don't have a rescue center anywhere near Frankfurt, what should you do? You should rehome some of your animals and have a rescue center near Frankfurt. So this is how these days, with even the telemetry data observability, it's so much more important than just knowing if the CPU is hot, because it can actually help drive some business decisions as well. So that's one of the examples of why you would want to involve people from not IT.
Yeah. But I suppose that's another example of something that you could look at it from a business perspective, but also from a technical perspective. It might drive technical decisions in which regions you're running your application from, for instance, or that sort of decisions as well as where you have your animal shelters.
Yeah, or if you had I don't know, if you had a website that sold books, and if people were searching for something and you were observing that on your website, and actually, you reversed that, and you weren't stocking that that item, then perhaps you should stock it. Or maybe there's a problem with the wording on your site, and actually you do stock it, but it's not coming up in your searches. Things like that. I mean, these are those kind of stakeholder dashboards, and this is why you need to speak to stakeholders. But your telemetry data can now give you that information, which I think can be quite impactful to how successful your organization is.
Yeah. All right. This is the AWS Nordics Office Hours with me, Gunnar. I'm joined today by Ania, the cat lady. I think I'm allowed to call you that since you had it in your introduction. And we are looking at how to develop your observability strategy. And we are now deep into the woods when it comes to dashboards in CloudWatch. Very fascinating territory. So, Ania, please.
Okay, so far we talked about observing what matters, knowing what your customers want, knowing what is important to your business, and defining some kind of criteria, or just finding out what that criteria is. It probably already exists in your organization. Service level agreements, service level objectives, key performance indicators. So we already looking at site availability and performance side of things. But as a charity, I've spoken to my stakeholders, and actually, what they care about is how many animals they adopt and how much money comes in so they can feed the animals that they have in care. So, this is another part of my dashboards where I'm really looking at that closely because if those numbers are not right, and this is the only, let's just say, exclusive way to adopt animals through our charity, there's no other way. If those numbers are not quite right and you understand correlations, then there might be something wrong with your application. So very often you, as part of your observability strategy, you need to find out, now you know what those success metrics or success criteria is that you're going to measure against. You need to think about what signals is my application outputting to help me measure against it, and then to help me take action if something's not quite right. So this typically will be through the use of metrics, logs, and traces, but you might supplement that with synthetic canaries. So synthetic canaries, for example, are scripts that you can configure to run and perform actions like you saw me before. Navigate to your website and search for a dog. You could be leveraging events from other sources, or that it's pieces of puzzle that you're putting together. But you do need to identify which parts of your application, which signals are going to help you measure against these things. So here on my dashboard, you can see that I'm actually checking how many dogs I adopted in the last 1 hour and last 1 day. Same for cats and same for rabbits. I also have a total number that adopted and donation values of how they're coming in. So I think it would be a good time to actually talk about, how do I know how many dogs and cats and rabbits I adopted? So you saw before, when I adopted an animal, I just clicked take me home, made the fictitious payment and clicked pay. So what does that look like in a log entry? So if I just nip over to these log groups, and when an actual adoption takes place, the entry that appears in the log file is a complete adoption event. So it looks like this, basically. So it's just a little call to the API. It's a post event, complete adoption, and you can see that a dog was adopted. Its ID, it's 002, and a 200 was returned. So actually, every time I see this entry in the log file, that's when a dog is adopted. So I need to catch that from the log file. So this is me deriving kind of metrics, business metrics from the log files that I have. So if you kind of remember what this looks like, there is a few ways to derive metrics from log files, but let's just say that in my case, which is actually not true, but let's just say I don't have much control over how the log file data is structured. So the option that I have here is to create metric filters to catch that data because I can't change it. So I need to create metric filters. So I've created 3 metric filters here. And I've kept it really simple. There's more complicated and better ways that you could do it, but I kept it very, very simple. So what I've done is I created a metric filter for cat adoptions, dog adoptions, and rabbit adoptions. And I'll just show you how I did that. So I selected create metric filter and entered this filter pattern here. And all I'm doing here is I'm looking for the method called post, as you saw on the log file entry. In the URL, I'm catching complete adoption, but also looking for kitten, which means I'm looking for when a cat is adopted with the status code of 200. So I'm just going to click next. And this is kind of, one of those moments where I half create something, but I've already done it. So I'm just going to give it a name, Ania test. And then I'm going to give it metric namespace details. So because this is a custom metric namespace, so not an existing AWS one. So it's like, a bucket of metrics where I'm putting this into. I'm calling it pet site, and the metric name will be cats adopted, which is self-explanatory. And every time this pattern is matched in my log file, I want it to be given a metric value of 1. So as I said, I can make this more complex, but I don't need to for our example. So I've done this 3 times, once for cats, once for dogs, once for rabbits. So now that I have metrics from log data, once I have metrics, I can have dashboards, I can have alarms. So this is what it looks like. So if I head over to the metric console in CloudWatch and go over to my custom namespaces, pet sites, metrics with no dimension, they're all the metrics. They're here now. And of course, because I have the metrics, and now I can display them on dashboards. But also, now that I have the metrics, now that I know how many cats, dogs, and rabbits are adopted, I can use something called metric math. So metric math allows you to basically run math expressions on your metrics. So because I know these 3, I know this one because this is just a sum of the 3 metrics. And again, sum is such an easy math expression, but you can multiply, you can average, you can do all sorts of clever things with it. So again, we're talking about observing what matters and having success metrics, success criteria, and finding the right source to extract them. But sometimes you're going to have to enrich that. So this is how you select the tools that are going to help you. You find out how you're going to derive the data. You find features that help you multiply or add up so that you can get the right data in front of the right people, so you know that your application is doing what it should be.
Yeah, no, this is great and a great example. And looking at other industries, I guess, or businesses, this could be number of purchases per minute, hour, whatever, stream starts per second, if you're a huge streaming company, for instance, and so on. And then knowing what the steady state is, what it normally looks like, and then basically comparing it to that to find these anomalies.
Exactly. And actually, as part of the observability strategy as well, a big step of it is a process step, is bringing it all together, and is making sure you document. You need to know what your baselines are. So as I said, document what that success criteria is and document what good looks like. And as you said, that will look different for everybody else. The advice is the same. Know what good looks like and measure against it. That's all it is. But it's also part of that process. It's documenting what the baseline is so that if you're going to add a new features, add a new services, you know how that impacts what was there before. So that's really, really important as well. Another part of the process is building this into your other processes. So for example, if you have dashboards, if you have alarms, and there is an incident, you need to have it as part of the process that you review your alerting strategy and you review your dashboarding strategy as part of the incident process, because you need to make sure that it's actually the plan that you come up with is fit for purpose as well. So that's another thing that you need to consider when you're thinking about your observability strategy. And again, documentation. If you're going to bring in a new service and you want your developers to put your log data in a specific format, they probably appreciate knowing this before they start building the code, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, this is great. And you talked about, well, basically learning from it and then being able to improve it. And we at AWS, Amazon, we have our correction of error process or mechanism that we use. And I know that's usually a part of it as well, looking over when there's incidents or events, looking over the observability part of it, looking at what we're observing, how did we observe it, and so on. So having that as part of the correction of error process for us is a key part of the observability strategy.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that I haven't really touched on is perhaps this is a good time to kind of talk about a representative, I can't say the word, kind of reactive monitoring, and how you can kind of how a good observability strategy and plan actually comes into it. So if it's okay, I'm just going to switch back over to my presentation. If you just bear with me, I'm just going to just move to a different slide. And I'll just tell you, why I'm talking about it. So when we talk about reactive monitoring, and when I talk to customers why they need to put together a good observability plan, and I don't know if this connects with you all, it definitely does with me. I was an SRE, I come from an ops background, I was an SRE for years, but typically when I used to come into the office, you come into the office and you have this blissful ignorance, right? Everything's fine because we fixed everything last week. Nothing else could possibly be broken.
Yeah.
Right? So we're gonna get this. We're gonna get all our project work done at last. Now, I never worked in an office with a hammock, but I heard that those startup types have hammocks. I'd love to have one, but I'm not saying people lie in hammocks, but they have this idea of getting all the work done. But then an alarm will come in, and that will confuse you. And that's because you fixed everything, and how can stuff be possibly broken again? And time then starts passing by. And unfortunately, you typically tend to get stressed. Now, for me, that always kind of manifested in my boss standing just there behind me going, "What's the impact, Ania? Can you jump on the incident bridge, Ania? What's the problem?"
Yep.
And you're kind of, you're still in the middle of your initial investigations. You're tailing a log file here, and you're looking at graphs here. You're looking at traces somewhere else, and you're still trying to find out what the issue is, let alone know what the impact is. And typically that can lead to false hope because that was the problem last week, so it's probably this week. So you might implement fixes that don't work. Now, as time passes by, you might start making these desperate decisions again. I put my hands up. I've restarted database servers that have been happily running for 2.5 years with no problem. But, I've restarted them just in case they fix the issue. When you're in that situation, you just kind of do anything to make that boss go away. But eventually somebody will work out the root cause. You'll feel this sense of enlightenment. Oh, that's what it is. You typically know how to apply the fix, and then you go back into your hammock. Um, but the reason that we talk about reactive monitoring and why observability, a good observability plan is important is because there's always going to be issues. There really will be. And actually, if you think about it, by the time an alarm sounds, somebody might already be impacted. There is already some time lost there in that detection mechanism. Okay, so when you're designing your alarm strategy, you need to actually be aware of those success metrics that we already talked about. You need to build that time to detect the problem into the overall measure. And again, the part where I said, you're looking here, you're looking there, you're looking there. If you are able to correlate that data, or if you can have it, point you at the right direction, that means you can close the circle quicker. And the good observability strategy will actually help you close the circle quicker. It'll help you cut out stress, false hope, and desperation. Because who wants to feel that? And selecting the right observability strategy through the right tools, through the right alerting strategy, through the right dashboarding strategy, that good observability plan will help you keep that circle much smaller. So I think that's really, really important as well.
I agree. I focus a lot on resilience. We talk observability and monitoring is of course a key part of that as well. And I truly do believe that being able to recover quickly from failure is much more important than not having failures at all. So having that observability in place so you're able to actually be able to recover from that failure is so important for organizations.
Absolutely. So there are a couple more things I can show you as well in terms of kind of the dashboard and also the correlation parts, if you'd like.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I wanted to show you is I have this. So this is more about kind of getting back to getting the right data on the dashboard.
Hmm.
When you're creating your dashboarding strategy, as well as stakeholder dashboards, low, high level dashboards, you need to think about all the other requirements that you need. So perhaps you've outsourced your first line to somebody else. One of the requirements there would be to probably share that dashboard without giving them access to your AWS account. But there might be data that you want to display on your dashboard that doesn't have direct integration. So here, being a charity, cost conscious, everything, we've got user defined cost allocation tags based on project. So I want to bring back, I want to display how much it's costing me to run this. Of course, this is my observability demo account. So it's got like so many things that, I'm not running in any way kind of optimized. So, this is just like the values are a bit silly, but how did I kind of get this cost explorer based on tag into this dashboard? I used something called a custom widget. So I don't know if you're familiar with them, but to add a custom widget, you click the plus button and you select custom widget. Now, I come from an ops background, so I try and not write code if I can help it. So I just use one of the pre-existing Lambda functions. So basically, what custom widgets do, they allow you to run a Lambda function that actually fetches the data into the dashboard for you. So the Lambda function defines how that data is displayed and then goes off, makes an API call, and fetches the data for you. So this Cost Explorer widget that I added is just a sample one that I used. So I used the Cost Explorer report. So if I were to click on this now, it'll just bring over our CloudFormation console. CloudFormation is just the way that we deploy infrastructure as code. And it'll deploy a Lambda function for me. Now, because I've already got one, I'll just show you what this Lambda function looks like. But that's just another example of how we can, display the correct data that's correct and important for you on our dashboard. So if I just open this Lambda function, again, I'm using an example one. The Lambda function here tells me, the which colors to use, which fonts to use, and also makes those API calls to Cost Explorer to pull the data in. So I actually left this pretty static, but what I did do is I added one little parameter to it. I added a filter. So then it looks for tags and it looks for a tag key of project and a tag value of pet site. So actually, if I go back to my dashboard here, this data is getting pulled in by that Lambda function. And if I change it to 1 hour, actually Cost Explorer, maybe I should change it to 1 day, let's just say. Okay, 3 days. And the value will change based on what's in Cost Explorer. So that's kind of another example of me using tools, selecting the right tools to measure what matters to me.
Right. But and that Lambda function could basically fetch data from any type of source. Then it could be something third party, or it could be a DynamoDB table, or wherever you have some sort of data that you'd like to display.
Yeah, if it can get added, then it can display it basically. So there is some sample Lambda functions there, or you can write your own. That just kind of depends of how good you are at it. But yeah, that's how you could fetch that extra information in.
Very cool. So question from the chat from our friend LinkedIn user, if there is any possibility for centralized dashboards for multiple accounts and to manage them in one place.
There is. So I don't have it in this demo. I've got it in a different demo, but at reInvent 2022, we launched something called cross-account observability. So basically, have I got time to demo it? Perhaps. Basically, what happens is you can define a monitoring account in CloudWatch, and you can deploy this link that allows the data to be shared. And what you can then do, it's per region, but you can view metrics from the accounts in your organization or whichever accounts you've designated, but you can also view logs, which means you can then run CloudWatch Log Insights queries over multiple logs from multiple accounts. So if we take this back to the correlation, the middle of the night, a lot of the time, many applications run across multiple accounts. Being able to correlate, being able to search across multiple accounts, multiple log groups is really handy. It's gonna get that circle closed quicker. So cross-account observability allows you to view traces, logs, and metrics from multiple accounts in the monitoring account. So I'll find the link for you, and we'll get it pasted by the end of the session. But cross-account observability would allow you to do that.
Oh, that's great. All right, and I wanted to ask you something about alarms. So you showed the example of your widgets showing the number of pets adopted per hour, I believe.
Yep.
And then if we want to move from that reactive way of thinking where something alerts us when there is actually a problem already, could we then make use of this data to set up alerting that alerts us when there is something about to happen, something that's an anomaly perhaps?
So yeah, there's some ways to do it. So you can use what you've got. So you can use alarms based on data that you know your threshold. So you can create alarms there. Or you could use something called anomaly detection, which means that you could it uses a machine learning model that looks and examines how these metrics look, and it lets you know if something's outside of the boundary that it's expecting. So you could do it that way. But when I talk to customers about alarms as well, it's not just about kind of doing it in a predicted way. It's kind of making sure that you're alarming on the correct things. So, when I was running through the presentation I did for the Stockholm Summit, a colleague of mine said he once got called out at 2 a.m. because a server was going to run out of its warranty in 90 days' time. Like, yeah, great. Yes, it would really mess with your business if that did run out of support and it didn't work. But did you need to know about this at 2 a.m?
Yeah.
Perhaps not. So so obviously it is actually really important that when you're designing your alarms, you set out to avoid alert fatigue at all costs. So one way to do it would be anomaly detection alarms. But you could just make use of things like composite alarms in CloudWatch, which let you combine alarms with and or not operators to make them more meaningful. Because actually, you can see here that the cats, dogs, and rabbits adopted in the last hour are not looking too good, but in a day we're looking good. So it's understanding that correlation. So you might have a composite alarm that says if dogs adopted in a day is less and something else, that's when it's business impacting.
Right.
Tell me about it then. So that's one way to do it. But since we're on a topic of an alarm, I'll just show you something else if that's okay. So we talked about PII and customer requirements, and customers obviously when they visit a website they don't care if your CPU is running hot as long as they can search for an animal, but they do actually care if they make a donation and their credit card data is exposed. So I'm using a feature in CloudWatch that allows me to search if there's sensitive content in the log files, basically. So if I head over to CloudWatch log groups, you might have spotted that I did have a kind of alert saying that there's sensitive data count in the columns. So if I actually go to pay for adoption, of course, I'm not being irresponsible with my donations. This is all fictitious. But you can see that there's 150 counts of sensitive data because I have added this data protection feature. So as the logs are ingested, I am checking and detecting credit card numbers and credit card security codes. And when I do that, when that's detected, that's exposed as a metric, and I can have an alarm about it. And then once I have an alarm as well, again, this is coming back to the strategy. If I actually follow this alarm here, I've designed my alarm so that it gives the responder some information about what to do if this happens. So obviously this is again very simple, but it says, PII has been found in your log group. Please investigate as soon as possible. There could have been a code change that's done something. Follow the process in this playbook. So what's a playbook? Basically, playbook will help a person know which process to follow, and it doesn't matter how long they've worked for the organization, but it'll help them actually know what do I do at 2 in the morning. And the run book will actually tell them how to do it. And if you can have automated or semi-automated run books, but design things like this as part of your alert strategy. Because again, if we go back to the circle, we want to be back in the hammock as soon as possible, right? So we want to be able to follow the steps as soon as possible. And then actually, if we go back to the topic of being able in that instance to correlate, another feature that was launched recently, or another improvement, is that I've already shown you that actually this metric is coming from a log entry. I can now click view here and click related logs, and will take me over to the correct log file automatically. So that wasn't there a few weeks ago, and that's there now.
Oh, that's
If
great.
if the alarm came from a synthetic canary, which again, these are scripts that you can run in the console and try and detect issues before your customers do, that would have said CN related synthetic canaries. So again, it's about that correlation, being able to get to the right data as soon as possible. So when you're thinking about the tools you're going to have for your observability strategy, think about things you're going to need and think about how you can correlate and how you can use those tools to get to the root cause quicker.
Cool. So the way many companies at least work and build, they release features, they release new parts of their application quite frequently. Is there anything in particular to think about in terms of observability when it comes to how to actually make sure that things work as they should after releases or when releasing?
So it's a mixture of things. Obviously, they can put in synthetic canaries into their CI/CD pipelines, for example. So a synthetic canary doesn't only have to look at the website. It can actually check API directly as well. It can work inside the VPC. So you could put a step in to run a canary during your deployment. And obviously, if that comes back not as expected, you could have an automatic rollback process. So that's one way to do it. You could have some form of a dashboard that looks at releases and unsuccessful releases and release success rates. But I would then bring it back to, is this part is the important part? Because do the customers care that your release failed, or do they care that they can adopt a customer? So adopt a dog. So yes, you absolutely can, but it's just finding the right place in your observability strategy to where you care about that. Because as long as you have a successful deployment and you're serving the right content to your customers and animals are being adopted and money's coming in, then that's the most important part. Yes, an unsuccessful release will affect that. So have some kind of validation in place, be that a canary or something else, And if you're providing, the important thing that we haven't kind of talked about is, I'm talking about organization. But if you're designing an observability strategy for a smaller project or team, how does that apply? Well, you're still providing a service and you still have customers. There could be internal customers, there could be external customers, but there's still some kind of success criteria that tells the rest of the organization to whether you're doing what you set out to do and you're providing a good service. So the same applies. If you want to count success criteria as a development team of how successful your releases are, that's where you build a dashboard around those.
Right.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense, definitely. And how the customers you're speaking with, the customers you're meeting, who does this? Who at the company? Is it a cloud ops team, some live ops team or something? Or is it different teams depending on the company, depending on their structure?
Of course, yeah, it does depend, but it's typically, the conversations typically start off very, very similar. So typically it's the SRE team that's kind of, the observability lies on their shoulders as such, and they come to us and, they don't typically have some of this information because they get asked to do this, but they don't really, they don't get this information from the stakeholders and what to do.
Yeah.
And they will come to us and typically ask and fixate on things like CPU or disk space or field ETL jobs or something like that. And that's the point where, when we say, we'll help you with this, that's fine. But if you actually want to think about the strategy, you need to bring in your non-technical stakeholders. You need to bring in your, decision makers that will help prioritize this, because this observability strategy actually impacts a lot more parts of the business that you realize. So it does typically start, with the SRE team or developers, but as somebody mentioned earlier, if you can bring everybody together, uh, the more people you involve, and the more opinions you bring in, the more successful you're going to be.
So just laughing at a comment from Harstead. I guess he wants to adopt a sloth. No sloths
Not
at your...
just yet.
No. I
No,
guess,
unfortunately not. I'd love
well,
one.
they might be just too popular, so you don't have to rescue them. That might be why. All right. We're quickly approaching top of the hour. This is AWS Nordics Office Hours with me, Gunnar, joined today by Ania. And we are talking about how to develop an observability strategy. And we've spent the last 53 minutes looking at examples of how to actually do that. Maybe we should run through that recap of what we've talked about to really hit the nail on the head, so to speak.
Let's try it. I've got a slide here that's a summary slide. I hope that makes sense. So when I kind of, if I want to start from start to finish, what I tend to just put it into a list. I don't know about you, but I like lists. I like walking away having a to-do list to do. So we start talking about, why is observability important, what to observe, and how to observe. Okay, so why? The why is to observe what matters. Why is your organization doing what it's doing? Why do your customers use the product? So it's about writing down those things. What matters to your business? What matters to your customers? What matters to your internal stakeholders? Step 2 is to actually define the KPIs, SLAs, SLOs, other success metrics. Call it, whatever you call it. It doesn't have to be any of those three. But step 2 is actually, and you need to be documenting this. It's sequential for a reason. So write down what your success metrics are and what good looks like, because that will tell you how to measure against what not good looks like. Step 3 is to think about, okay, which signals from my applications are going to help me measure against the objectives that I've written down. Is this data in the log files? Will I need some synthetic canaries? Will I need tracing? Will I need something else? But that's step 3. Now that you know what your SLAs, SLOs, whatever are, you know more or less the sources of that will help you measure against them. time to define your alerting strategy in line with those success criteria. Being deliberate about avoiding alert fatigue, making alerts more, more meaningful, being actionable. That's really important. Don't call anybody out at 2 a.m. because something's going to run out of warranty. They can't do anything about it. So have run books, have playbooks, have actionable alarms. Once you have your alerting strategy, your dashboarding strategy, stakeholder dashboards, high-level dashboards that will tell you the health of your application before a technical metric can, but also those low-level dashboards. And additional requirements, sharing your dashboards, custom data, things like that. Once you know what these are, you can select your tools. So you can you can do your research, you know what your requirements are, pick the right tool for the job. Don't go picking so many features that you're never going to use. You know what you're going to need in the next maybe few years. So pick the tools that are right for the job. Try and consolidate and standardize, because obviously that makes it easier for everybody else. And the team typically might save you money. It'll make the system more supportable. And then once you know what tools you're going to have, it's the process. So make sure you define the process, you document your baselines. We say in Amazon, don't boil the ocean. What does that mean? My husband went, what does that mean? Well, it means that it's easier to boil the water in the kettle than to boil the water in the ocean. So actually, maybe start with the most important application first, or start with a dashboarding layer, start with something, but have this process and implement it, and then iterate. Obviously, just keep iterating, build it into your internal processes, check that it meets expectations after incidents. Just continue this virtuous cycle of customer improvement. So that's the 8 steps.
Right. And yeah, I think that the tool selection comes first at number 6. I think that's an easy one to miss. It's so easy, especially as engineers or as techies, that you dive straight into the tools and just start doing things. Yeah, I like this. All right, I'm going to share the link to the workshop once again in the chat. Can you quickly say what people get to do in the workshop?
I can do, yes. So the one observability workshop is something that we run with our customers, but you can also run this yourself. It's on GitHub. You can launch the infrastructure and have your own pet adoption website in your environment. And what you can do is you can check out the features that I talked about. They include both AWS kind of native observability tools and also the AWS open source tools like Amazon Managed Grafana, Amazon Managed Prometheus, AWS distro for open telemetry. So the tools are there, and we do keep this workshop updated, and you can basically play around. And what's great about the workshop is that, it doesn't just have 5 minutes of telemetry because you just launch an EC2 instance. It runs EKS, ECS, Lambda. It has like almost every language under the sun. And it really helps you kind of play with the tools and have the right telemetry, there's traffic generators running. So yes, it's something you can run with the account team, or you can launch in your own environment and have a play around with.
All right, that's great. Okay, and with that, it's time to close shop for today. I want to thank Ania for joining today and walking us through how to develop your observability strategy. Where can people see you next? Any other summits coming up?
Not for this one, not yet. I'm going to be at Reinforce talking about other things like AWS Config and AWS CloudTrail Lake, but observability, hopefully there'll be more of these because, I love talking about this stuff, but yeah, watch this space.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining. Thanks to all the viewers as well for joining us today. And with that, I hope to see many of you again next week. Bye-bye.